Hello, all. So we'll get started in a few minutes. We've got about 5 minutes left. So if you have any questions, follow up from last week or any of the previous sessions, whether you watch live or the recording, please let me know. And today we are going to be using the same props. So I'll go over these again, but just for anyone who still needs to gather things, a bolster if you have it. If you don't have a bolster, you can use 2 bed pillows, or we can use a stack of blankets like the one we have here. Maybe some yoga blocks, as you see here. If you don't have yoga blocks, don't worry. You can use some of our blankets, or we can grab some extra pillows or throw pillows so that we can create supports like this if we need it today. Today we'll have an option using this, but we'll also have an option without. So if you don't have blocks today, don't worry about that. And we'll be starting with some pranayama or breath work. So if you like, maybe have something nearby that we can drink. Sometimes our throat will get a little dry. And feel free to put on any music you like as well in the background. So we can take a few moments. I'm seated on a bolster right now. That's how it's comfortable for me to sit. But you can sit however you like. If you'd like to get all comfy and ready, if you like, you can be seated or you can be reclined, whatever is most comfortable for you. So whichever works. And I'm just going to double check and make sure that I don't have any messages or people aren't asking, hey, I can't get in. So we'll just take a moment. Let's see. Okay, everything looks okay. So we have quite a few. There we go. Okay, just making sure everything is correct. Had one problem on daylight savings day with being in the wrong room, so I just want to confirm everything. And I have my device here so I can see comments. So if you have a question or a concern throughout the practice, or a posture isn't quite working for you, feel free to type into the chat. Let me know about what the issue is, and I'll offer variations or maybe an alternate posture if that's what's needed. But when we're ready, excuse me, it's very dry in Toronto here today. And I also just want to remind everybody that this is something that we can also practice in bed, which might be especially helpful if we have a hard time getting up and down off the floor, or if we just need a little extra support or comfort. If we deal with muscle pain, things like that, we can be on a bed. Or if our bed's really soft, we can put down a couple of blankets over our mat or directly on the floor, just to make things a little bit softer, a little bit more cushioned for us. And we'll go ahead and get started. Again, feel free to ask questions as we go, but I'll introduce myself. Hello and welcome. My name is Shannon. My pronouns are they, them. And today we have the final session in this series of restorative yoga for long COVID. All of these asana and all of the breath work or pranayama is meant to support folks who are dealing with long COVID and the various conditions associated with long COVID. Of course, this is not medical advice, but this is based on the science that we currently have. And another big part of this is that we want to encourage ourselves to rest, to relax, to take time. Because one thing that we do know is that the more that we are in a position where we have to force ourselves to move, to work during a COVID infection, the more likely we are to develop long COVID. So remembering that we need to set aside time and we need to be kind to ourselves is really kind of the backbone of restorative to begin with. So it lends itself very well towards supporting folks with long COVID or who are currently experiencing COVID itself. So we're going to start with a grounding, and then we'll move from our grounding into our pranayama or breath work. Today we have the option to be seated or reclined for our breath work as well. We'll be practicing Dirgha pranayama or 3-part breath or 3-part wave, depending on what school of yoga you practice. But if you want to be reclined or semi-reclined, but maybe you have a hard time being fully reclined because of congestion, things like that, I want to offer this bolster setup. So here you can see I have one block on the highest position, one on the lowest position to create this L. And we're going to lean our bolster or bed pillows against that to create a ramp so that we're semi-inclined or semi-reclined. And if this feels a little high, you can take that higher block and turn it on its side and make it slightly lower. So you can dial up or dial down. If you don't have blocks, you can use throw pillows, bed pillows, anything you need to get this incline. And we just want to make sure that our spine is supported. So we would bring our bum against the base and recline back, making sure, again, our spine is supported. And then we can either stretch the legs out, or we can have a rolled blanket or bolster beneath the knees or pillow beneath the knees as well. Or we can lie flat directly against the ground in Savasana with maybe a bolster or pillow beneath the knees. I'm going to remain seated. You can sit cross-legged on your knees, whatever's comfortable. I like Baddha Konasana or butterfly, feet together, knees apart, because this allows me to bring the belly between the legs so that I have less pressure on the hips and so that I have more space to breathe. So once we find a position that works for us, we'll take a few moments, settle in. We might take a moment and notice our surroundings. We might notice any sounds in our space. I live in a city, so through your speakers, you might hear cars, sirens, people yelling. It happens. But we want to be aware of these sounds so that they don't shock us while we're resting. And if we're comfortable, we might bring a soft gaze, or we might gently close the eyes. And we might slowly dial in on the breath. So noticing the inhale and the exhale. We might take a few deep breaths, maybe in through the nose, out through the mouth, if that's comfortable for us. Maybe releasing with a sigh or vocalization on the exhale. Letting go of the day, week, month so far. Allowing ourselves to fully arrive on the mat. We'll return to our natural breath, whatever that looks like for us. We might begin to notice the sensation of the body against the mat, against the props, against the floor, the bed. And we'll connect down through those objects, through the object, through the floor, all the way down to the earth, no matter how far beneath us the earth is today. Allowing ourselves to rest against the unconditional support that the earth provides. Allowing ourselves to be supported, to be held. Allowing ourselves to let go. The earth doesn't just connect us throughout to the natural world itself. It also connects us to our ancestors. It connects us through time. It connects us through space. No matter how far apart we are today, we are all resting upon the same earth. The same earth as our ancestors, the original stewards of the land. It connects us to the founders of the cultural and spiritual practices we still use today. All rested upon the same earth. All of these relationships, all of these ideas create a foundation on which we can learn, on which we can grow, and on which we can rest. And today we'll be inviting rest. We might notice any feelings that we want to rush, that we want to move on to the next thing. Without guilt, without shame, we'll acknowledge them when they come up. And see if we can let them fade into the background. Not trying to push them out of our heads, not feeling bad about wanting to move, but coexisting with it. And when we're ready, we'll come back to the breath. Noticing the inhale, the exhale. We might notice if we're breathing into the heart space or belly. No wrong answers, no judgment. We might notice if we're breathing in through the nose or the mouth. And we might notice where we feel the breath in the body. Do we feel the shoulders moving or the ribs expanding? Do we feel the heart space moving up and down, or maybe the belly? Again, no wrong answers. And when we're ready, we'll start to slowly alter the breath. So first we'll see if it's comfortable for us, if we can breathe in and out through the nose. If we're dealing with congestion, or if this isn't accessible to us, that's okay. We can breathe in and out through the mouth as well. And when we're ready, we'll see if we can pull that breath down into the belly. So if we like, we might bring the hands to the belly and notice how that feels. We might notice the hands moving in and out with the breath. As we pull air into the diaphragm and release it. If we're reclined, we might also notice how this feels through the back body, feeling the back of the low back pressing into the mat or against the props. If we like, we can move our hands towards the back to feel that expansion if we're seated. And then we'll see if after we breathe into the belly, if we pull in a bit more air, if we can feel the ribs expand. So maybe moving our hands to our sides. Pulling down into the belly, into the ribs, exhaling from the ribs and from the belly. Again, noticing the three-dimensional nature of the breath. How the ribs expand forward, out to the sides, and backward as well. And then we might bring the hands to the heart space. We'll expand into the belly, the ribs, and again, taking a bit more air, feel the heart space open. Exhale, releasing from the heart space, the ribs, and the belly. Again, noticing not just through the movement through the front, but maybe through the back, through the sides, under the arms. And finally, we might bring the fingers up towards the collarbones. And as we inhale, filling the belly, filling the ribs, filling the heart space all the way up to the shoulders. And releasing from the shoulders, the heart space, the ribs, and the belly. We'll continue this for about another minute on our own. Filling all the way up with air, exhaling, softening from the top down. Like a wave rolling in and sliding back out. And when we're ready, we'll release into our natural breath. We might bring a little bit of movement into the body, maybe rocking from front to back or side to side. If we're reclined, maybe bringing some movement into the fingers, the toes. Maybe gently rolling onto the right or left side. And when we're ready, slowly making our way up to seated so we can set up for our first supported posture. So with our 3-part breath, we're going to be practicing this in our postures throughout. Um, we know that this particular breath is really helpful for folks who are dealing with long COVID. Number one, breathing in it through the nose helps produce nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator. Also can create reservoirs of nitric oxide in the sinuses, which may be helpful in actually reducing further infection. Science is there, not quite sure how much research, but it certainly doesn't hurt. Um, and we're going to be practicing supported child's pose. If supported child's pose is not comfortable, I'll also be offering a second posture called surfboard. So both of these will provide us with the ability to put a little bit of pressure on the front part of the body so that we are supported. And also it encourages the breath to fill the lungs. It provides space through the back of the body, and the back of well, the literal back, the back of the lungs as well, so that we can basically take up a bit more real estate with our lungs. So first we have a few variations for supported child's pose. If we like, we can have a bolster directly against the mat. And I'm going to set up on this side so y'all can see a bit better. So the first one, we can have the bolster directly against the ground. Some folks prefer to be raised a bit higher. So if we like, we can take our blocks and create a platform as well. This for me is more helpful than directly against the mat, but still is a little intense on the front body for me because I am in a larger body. My thighs and my calves press together, which kind of pushes the load onto the front part of my body, which means that my shoulders, my neck, my head could take more of the strain. So I'm going to actually make the platform that we just saw. If we have any sort of issues with the knees, we can place a blanket down. We can also grab this blanket. We can also take one of our blankets and roll this. And this can go underneath the ankles, so that when we come down into our posture, I'm going to open this up actually. Especially if you deal with like plantar fasciitis, it allows us to keep the bend. Allows us to keep the bend in the ankle so the foot isn't flat. So I'm going to bring my ramp back exactly the same way that we set up at the beginning of the class. And then I'm going to bring my legs to either side. So my knees are open. And then we can come down to tabletop, no matter how the bolster is set up. And we're going to allow ourselves to rest against the bolster. We can rest on a cheek. If that doesn't feel comfortable, we can keep the head straight. Anything that feels good here. We can hug our bolster. We can bring our hands to our sides. Whatever feels comfortable here. This is our supported child. If this does not feel comfortable, if it's maybe too much pressure on the knees, I also want to offer surfboard. So for surfboard, we can take our bolster or our stack of blankets, and we're going to support ourselves from about the ribs up. We want to make sure that the belly has space to expand, so we might let it come a little bit further down. I'm going to leave my blanket here, but I am going to push my roll down so that it still stays under my ankles. And if you're like me, maybe your chest is a little bit larger, grab another blanket or pillow to place beneath the head. I'm going to push my roll down so it's beneath my ankles. So we have lots of options here. Once we find the one that we feel comfortable in, I still need this right now. We'll take a few deep breaths. Maybe in through the nose, out through the mouth. Allowing ourselves to rest against the support of the props, the support of the earth. And then we'll come back to our 3-part wave breath. So bringing the breath in and out through the nose if we aren't there already, and if that's comfortable for us. Pulling the breath down into the diaphragm, the ribs, the heart space, the shoulders, and on the exhale, releasing from the heart space, releasing from the ribs, releasing from the belly. Again, inhaling. Continuing to breathe. And we'll notice the expansion through the back body. So whereas previously we might have noticed the belly expanding forward, we might begin to notice the expansion through the back body. So maybe noticing through the low back, the hips, the ribs, between the shoulder blades. Exhale, draining from the shoulder blades, the ribs, and the low back. We'll be here for the next 4 minutes or so. If we like, we can rest on the opposite cheek to bring a bit of balance to the neck. And when we're ready, we might bring the hands down to either side of the bolster beneath the shoulders if we're not there already. We'll find our natural breath and then slowly begin to press up through tabletop, making our way into a seated position as we set up for the next posture. If we are in the surfboard and coming onto our knees isn't comfortable, then we might roll off to the right or left side and press up from there. For our next posture, we're going to be coming into a posture called Mountain Brook. It's a variation on fish. And for this, we'll be using a rolled blanket and possibly a bolster or a few pillows. And we may also want a pillow for under the head or a blanket for under the head. So if we like, we can take our bolster or one of our pillows, and that's going to go just south of the center of the mat. This is going to support under our legs. If we like, we can also have our eye pillow handy or a blanket that we can pull over the head to cover the eyes, just to help us come into a deeper state of relaxation. I'm going to take one of my blankets, fold it into a small square to use as a pillow for under the head. If you like, you can also roll the edge of the blanket, and then this part, the rolled part, can go under the neck. The head can rest on the soft bit. That's really up to you, whatever feels comfortable there. And then we're going to take one of our blankets. I'm going to go for one of my thicker blankets. But start small if you haven't come into this style of heart opener. So this is going to be rolled into a small bolster. And this is going to go beneath the shoulder blades. So if our shoulder blades kind of curve out like this, they're going to go right underneath the base. So it's going to go along the width of the mat. And there's a bit of eyeballing involved here until you've done it a few times and you know kind of where you need to set up for your body. So I have everything set up here. Eye pillow is within reach if you'd like to use it. And then I'm going to swing the legs over the bolster, or I like to place the bolster and then lift the legs. And then recline backwards. We're going to make sure that we have that placement of the roll under the shoulder blades. And if we're using the rolled blanket under the head, again, we want the rolled portion under the neck. And this is optional. So if you like, you can have the head directly against the mat. And if after a few moments you feel like you need to adjust the blanket roll, please do. If you need to kind of kick your bolster or pillow to the correct spot under your knees. And what we're doing here is we're allowing the heart space to open. We're allowing a stretch through the lower abdomen. And we have a soft inversion because we're bringing the heart space above the head. And the arms can come out to the sides, or we can have the hands against the body, anything that feels comfortable here. If you want a bit more heart opening, you can bring the arms into cactus on either side. Or we can have the arms as if we're in Savasana, kind of coming out towards the edges of the body. So once we've found our position, we'll again take a few deep breaths, maybe in through the nose, out through the mouth if that's helpful. And we can release here. Maybe welcoming back our 3-part breath, pulling down into the belly, the ribs, the heart space, releasing from the heart space, the ribs, and the belly. If we're comfortable here, we can feel free to stay here. But if we like, we might slowly begin to roll off to the right or left side. We might reach behind us, remove our bolster or our rolled blanket, setting it off to the side. And then we can roll back onto the back for a comfortable Savasana with our bolster or blanket or pillow beneath the knees. We can adjust our head pillow however is comfortable. We just want to make sure that the shoulders are against the mat itself. We also have the option to come into constructed rest here, where we place the soles of the feet against the ground, maybe moving the feet towards the edges of the mat, resting the knees towards each other. Or if we prefer to be semi-reclined, we can bring our platform back with our blocks and our bolster, much like we had at the beginning of the session. For our Shavasana, we'll take a few moments here, allowing ourselves to find a position where we're comfortable. We might breathe in and out through the nose again. Again, if that's comfortable. Noticing the inhale and the exhale. Allowing ourselves to rest against the support of the mat, the props, the earth. And we'll take a moment to come through a body scan. So we'll start by noticing the feet. And we're not necessarily trying to cultivate anything here as much as just notice what we're experiencing in the moment, whether it's tingling or the difference in temperature between our body and the air around us. We might notice the feel of fabric if we're wearing socks, or we might recognize that we don't feel anything at all. There's no judgment. There's no attachment. We're witnessing. So maybe again, noticing from the toes to the heel. Maybe noticing the top of the foot and the ankle. On our exhale, releasing the feet and moving into the lower portion of the leg. We might notice the calves or the backs of the legs. We might notice the shins or the tops of the legs. On our exhale, releasing and moving into the knee joint itself, noticing the inside and the outside. Releasing and moving into the thighs. We might notice the quads or the tops of the thighs. We might notice the hamstrings or backs, the inner line, the outer line. On our exhale, releasing, moving into the pelvis, hips, and bum. On our exhale, releasing, moving into the torso, noticing the belly and low back. We might notice any movement here. sensation. Releasing, moving upward into the ribs and heart space. Releasing and moving into the shoulders, the shoulder blades. Letting go. Moving into the arms, from the shoulder to the elbow, from the elbow to the wrist, from the wrist to the fingertips, noticing the back of the hand, the fingers, the thumb, and noticing the palms of the hands. Maybe allowing ourselves to invite softness into this space before releasing. Moving into the neck and throat. Moving upward into the base of the head. First noticing the back of the head, up through the hair, towards the crown. Maybe wrapping around the sides of the head, noticing the ears. Moving into the face, noticing the jaw, the lips, the cheeks, nose, eyelids, eyebrows, the forehead, all the way up to the crown of the head. Taking a moment and noticing the whole body. And on the exhale, letting go. Allowing ourselves to find rest in this moment. Reminding ourselves that we are not our thoughts. We are not the expectations we have for ourselves or the expectations that others have for us. We are not our production. When we let go of what we are not, we find space to breathe, and we find space to simply be. We'll be here in this space for the next few moments. Excuse me. If we like, we of course can stay where we are. But if we'd rather, we might slowly begin to bring movement into the fingers, the toes, the head and neck. We can take any intuitive movement that feels good. If we're reclined, we might gently roll onto the right or left side. Maybe slowly blink the eyes open. And when we're ready, come up to a seated position if we choose. From wherever we are. If we like, we can bring the hands to heart center or place them anywhere against the body that feels good. And we'll take 3 breaths together in a way that feels comfortable for us. We'll take a moment to thank ourselves for making space for rest and breath. And I'd like to thank you so much for sharing your practice with me today. I'll be here for the next few minutes if anyone has any questions. Also, I do have 2 offerings coming up in April if you're interested. I have a restorative practice on Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. And that'll be live stream via Zoom. And I also have live stream via Zoom on Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern, a gentle chair yoga. So again, very helpful for folks who may be dealing with chronic illness. It's a 30-minute class, very low spoon class. So if you're interested, I'll put all the information down below if you're watching the recording. But otherwise, if you have any questions about what we have practiced today or in the previous sessions, please let me know. I have my chat open here. I'll give everyone a few moments to collect their thoughts or to remain in Shavasana if they like as well. Hello, Alessandra. I'm new and just wondering whether you'd recommend I get some yoga blocks for next time. Yoga blocks are really helpful for any part of our practice, no matter what type of yoga. So they are helpful. And depending on what type of practice you generally have, depends on what type of yoga blocks. These are a high density foam core, which are really great for restorative because they're a little, not too squishy, but a little soft. So if you use them directly against the skin. I don't have my cork blocks, but they also have a cork version that if you practice something more like vinyasa, if you are going to be using these for downward dog and you're in a larger body like mine, then you might want to go for the cork. They're a bit firmer and provide a bit more support. But if you are a straight size person, then these high density foam blocks will probably be more than enough support for you. But yeah, it's helpful for restorative because it gives us options. As you can see how I was able to change the inclination on our bolster. And these just offer a bit more confidence than using blankets and pillows, but blankets and pillows will also work. So yeah, if you plan on practicing restorative on a regular basis, then these will probably be very helpful. And then we also have bolsters, which can be replaced by 2 firm bed pillows or a stack of blankets. A stack of blankets really well too. But mine are from, my bolster here is from Yoga Hustle. As you can see, I have a longer, thinner bolster there. That one's from B Yoga, but you can also find them at like Yoga Direct outlets at fairly reasonable prices too. So thank you, Alessandra. Happy to help. When you get started, it can be confusing because there are so many different things going on. But for restorative, I find blocks are really helpful, as are bolsters if you practice regularly. But if you practice like semi regularly, bed pillows will work fine. Yeah. And just as an accessibility tool, if you are dealing with long COVID, have a hard time getting up and down off the ground, blocks can really help with that too, which I can demo if anybody needs. And oh, yeah, no. Okay, so you're proud of yourself for kneeling. Thank you. I'm so glad. I'm so glad you're proud of yourself. But remember, you never have to kneel. I'll always offer alternatives because for some people it's just not accessible at all. But yes, very well cushioned. Great. The whole point of restorative, really, I mean, all yoga, but especially restorative, is to be kind to ourselves. In yoga philosophy, there's a concept called ahimsa, which is non harm. So, not harming others, but also not harming yourself, being kind to yourself, offering yourself softness when you need it. And if you need softness beneath your knees, then please take it. Um, Thank you for advocating for yourself and doing what you need to do. That's amazing. And thank you for sharing that with me. Yeah. For me, kneeling on and off is difficult. It depends on my inflammation level. I have a condition called lipedema. And so depending on how inflamed I am, it can be very painful. Even just sitting on directly on the mat can be painful. So sometimes I'll be practicing with like one of these cushy fleece blankets spread out over the mat if I'm practicing restorative. Because softness is always welcome. There's nothing wrong with it. um, yeah. Well, thank you, Anne. Thank you so much. So if anybody else has any questions, please let me know. But otherwise, in about 3 minutes, I'll go ahead and wrap up, and then I'll re-edit. So the live with the full commentary will stay on as well, um, under the videos, but the edited will be under the long COVID playlist, so that way folks can go through the whole playlist and they just have the practice there. Alessandra, I have lipedema. Yeah, it's been painful. Yeah. A lot of, yeah, it's a condition that a lot of folks have, but not a lot of folks understand how to kind of deal with in terms of practicing. And because our bodies can be very disproportionate. um, Things like the variations for child's pose are really important. Um, and again, extra padding. Never be afraid to add an extra blanket if something doesn't feel quite comfortable, especially with restorative practices, because the whole point is to let the body release and relax. And a lot of the times people think that, oh, I'm just going to force myself into this position. But when you do that, you actually cause the muscles to tense and tighten, and you're not going to get the same level of stretch. You're not going to get the same amount of release than if you start small and very supported. And then the body starts to relax and starts to let go. And then you can open more. And you can always remove a blanket later if you need. But it's really hard to build that back up once you've already tightened everything because you don't feel secure. Yeah, and thing to be careful of too with lipedema is that we tend to be a bit hypermobile. EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, is a comorbidity of lipedema. So make sure that when you're in postures, you're bending the joints, bending the knees a bit so that we're not hyperextending through the knees, hyperextending through the elbows. If we're lying on our sides, make sure that we're not pulling the shoulders together and caving in the chest. So maybe have an extra pillow that you can put against the body that you can drape your arm over. because these are all things that also can be associated with lipedema, even if we don't have an official diagnosis for any of it. And if it's not a concern, then you're just being extra kind to yourself. So there's really no downside with being cautious in that way. I'm so glad. Thank you, Alessandra, that it's helpful. I know I'm planning a yoga for lipedema series that will probably be out in a couple months. It'll be another live on YouTube. These types of series I don't like putting behind paywalls because I feel like they're but all my classes are sliding scale. So they start at around $8 US and go up to 25, as much as you want to pay, really. But thank you, Nicole. Sorry. You never know. I just use the name that's there. I'm glad. Oh, thank you. I'm so glad it's been helpful. And I certainly hope that it does assist with mobility. Sometimes, it's just about maintaining what we have, or possibly increasing. But in terms of functional movement, I feel like that's the primary thing. It doesn't matter if you can twist yourself into a pretzel. If you have a hard time looking behind you, to reach something, or when you're driving. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for spending this time with me. I'll probably have the edited version up within a couple hours. It takes a little while for everything to render on this side. But again, thank you so much for hanging out. I hope to see you again soon, and I'll put all the information for the classes in the caption. And I think in the caption there is the website, so you can go to the website. It's right on the front page too. So if you're interested. But otherwise, have a wonderful day, wonderful evening, morning, depending on where you are. And I'll see you again soon. So as I come up, I can demo how to use the blocks to get off the floor. So if you do have a hard time getting up and down off the floor, yoga blocks can be really helpful, or a small table or chair. Place it underneath. Come up so that you're on one leg forward, down, back leg. Let me turn to the side here. Back leg, we're going to curl the toes under and press up, shifting the weight into the hands. And that's going to help us stand up. So yoga blocks are good for everything. But thank y'all so much. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon.